Use the Mobalytics pregame function to get a competitive edge over your opponents and mentally adjust your playstyle as needed for the upcoming games that you're about to play. It lets you know things like if your opponent is on a win streak, or even if it's their first time playing that specific champion. A while back, I made a video about a Sion player who would play full AD Sion bot. He did so with his laning partner, a Bard. Back then when I featured him in a video, he was only Diamond 2. And back then, he was still nothing more than a meme. But recently, he has actually been able to hit all the way up to rank 2, playing full AD Sion top. So this is going to be a first. I'm going to make a video about the same player for a second time. This is how to play like a challenger. This is the BausFFS. He's currently rank 2 on the EU West solo queue ladder, and his most played champion is Sion. And not just any Sion, full damage Sion top. He has been able to stay comfortably in the top 10 challenger for the last few weeks, and his build is nothing like what traditional Sion players are playing. The most commonly rushed item on Sion is actually Sunfire Cape, but the boss never ever buys Sunfire Cape. The first item that he almost always purchases is Yumu's Ghostblade or Storm Razors. Whereas other Sion players struggle to climb with full tank Sion, why has full AD Sion been able to climb all the way up to rank 2? Full tank Sion is by no means bad, but at the end of the day, Sion is still Sion, and he's still going to be a full tank champion. When you're playing tanks in solo queue, it is significantly harder to climb than if you're playing a damage carry. Because of the fact in solo queue, you're mostly going to be relying on your teammates. While there are of course ways that tanks can put themselves out there and help their team get stronger, it is still significantly more difficult than just getting yourself strong and carrying through your own personal power. Even if you're strong on tank Sion, at the end of the day, all you're really doing is serving as a big CC bot for the entire team. Yes, you can still zone backline, but you can't really ever be a threat to them. One big difference between this Sion player and other players in Challenger is his KDA. If you look at his numbers, these are not the numbers of a Challenger player. Most Challenger players have very low death scores. Dying less is one of the hallmarks of getting into high elo, but his KDA has not changed whatsoever since his days in Diamond 2. He's still getting a large amount of kills and a large amount of deaths. That's because AD Sion is still really good when he dies and goes into his passive. While other Sion players usually take Meteor in order to get more lane pressure, the only rune that the boss has ever taken is Glacial Augment. Glacial Augment makes your passive deal more damage because, well, you're slowing them down. If Glacial Augment even allows you to get 2 more auto attacks while you're in your passive, that's the difference between your target living or dying. So how's the boss able to get a lead in the early game? The most common way that he gets a big advantage in the early game is by setting up his level 1 properly. By waiting for the right time and hiding in this bush and waiting for the enemy top laner to come back from their leash, he sets up a fully charged Q that does a disgusting amount of damage at level 1. This huge advantage early game will definitely lead to either a summoner spell being blown or the enemy laner being forced to go back and use their TP. AD Sion is actually pretty poor in the early game if you can't get his Qs off properly. So getting this first Q off for free in the early game makes a big difference on whether or not you can actually play aggressively during the laning phase. If you're just sitting back and guarding your turret, you're not going to be in an optimal position to get this free amount of damage. The reason that the boss always goes into this bush is because a lot of players who are used to playing against Sion know that they want to set up in one of the bushes in top lane, and so most of the time they try to play away from the bushes and avoid being in range to get hit by one of Sion's Qs. Hitting this ability on its full charge is extremely important in terms of how good or poorly you're going to do on AD Sion. You have to be really good at predicting how your enemy is going to respond and how they're going to move in reaction to you charging up this ability. A little bit too late or a little bit too early can mean the difference between you getting a kill or you dying yourself. The boss's single best skill is being able to predict when and where his opponents are going to be in order for him to be able to charge up his Qs. Playing full AD Sion takes a lot of prediction and patience. Knowing when and where the enemy is going to push up and how far they're going to push up is a big difference in whether or not you land your Qs. If you get a free, fully charged Q on someone, that means you are stunning them for 2.5 seconds. This allows you to get all your other basic abilities down and then continuously CC them to the point where they can't even do anything to respond to you. Let's take a quick look at his full combo. Charging up a Q in Fog of War in order to get the full amount of damage. This will usually deal around half or more than half of their HP. This is then followed up by an auto attack and an E in order to shred some of the enemy armor. If the enemy champion is still not dead by that point, it will usually be followed up with his ultimate at point blank. This will then stun them for another half second, allowing you for another auto attack. And if they are still not dead at that point, your Q will be up momentarily in order to finish them off for good. Most of the time against squishy AD carries, they won't even survive the first auto attack. Now let's suppose that you didn't get the advantage early game. You weren't able to get the level 1 Q, or you were simply in a matchup that has a lot more mobility than you do and is able to dodge your Qs very easily, or maybe the jungler camped you. For whatever reason, you've fallen behind the enemy opponent. Now, most champions who specialize in nothing but lethality usually fall off and become irrelevant for the rest of the game because they didn't get their snowball. So some Sion players might be tempted to switch from full damage Sion into a full tank Sion because they're losing their lane. The boss never ever does something like this. If you're going to lose lane on AD Sion, and it does happen, and then you decide to switch over to full tank Sion, you're going to be even more useless than before. One of the best points about full AD Sion is that even if you're behind and you're going to die in a team fight, you're still going to be somewhat relevant and useful thanks to your passive. If you decide to switch over to a half and half build, you're not going to be tanky enough to really do what tank Sion does, and you're not going to do enough damage to be a threat anymore. Now, though your ultimate can be comboed with your Q, it is still better and more ideal to be using it as an engage tool. Because the damage ramps up with how much you've been charging it, this ultimate hits its maximum amount of damage after 3 seconds. The damage difference between a charged Sion ultimate and a non-charged Sion ultimate can be up to 3 to 5 times more damage. Much of the time, if you hit a fully charged ultimate, you don't really need anything else other than another auto attack to 100 to 0 an AD carry. You gotta be willing to go in whenever you see an opportunity with a squishy champion that can't get away from your ultimate. Full AD Sion, while he is not the best split pusher, his ultimate actually does affect turrets. So when you're pushing in for those final 2 Nexus turrets, an ultimate that is easily able to chunk those turrets to half while getting yourself to the objective faster than anyone else is extremely useful for when you want to finish a game off. One of the best things about AD Sion is, even if you're not watching the minimap and you're being a stupid idiot, should you end up dying and giving them a kill, thanks to Glacial Augment and your passive, you're almost guaranteed to get one back for yourself. While this certainly doesn't mean you should be dying to look for kills, it is a nice backup plan to have when you are going to lose something on your team. The intent on this champion is not to die every single time, but dying is one of your best tools to use. So while you're not exactly feeding to win, you are sacrificing yourself to win. For your build, start Longsword and 3 health pots. While Corrupting Potion is the more common start for most Sion players, you aren't really using your E to harass them, and so you don't need as much mana in the lane. Rush Serrated Dirk for the lethality and get more longswords. Get Yumu's Ghostblade ASAP. Finish out your boots depending on the enemy comp. If you're snowballing really hard and you're up against champions with little mobility that can't get away from you, you can pick up Storm Razors first over Yumu's Ghostblade. But generally speaking, you're going to be using Yumu's to speed yourself up in order to be able to punch people more. Follow up your build with more lethality items such as Knight's Veil and Duskblade. If the enemy team has a lot of tanky champions, you can get Lord Dominic's Regard. If they have a lot of healing, you can also get Executioner's Calling instead. You can also opt into Trinity Force for the extra little bit of stickiness that Trinity Force is going to give you on top of its own damage. For your abilities, max Q, E, then W. For runes, go into the Inspiration Tree, taking Boots, Minion Dematerializer, and Approaching Velocity. As we discussed before, Glacial Augment makes your punches much easier to land. Not only does Glacial Augment help you in your passive, it also helps you land your Q in lane. Because it slows them, it allows you to get a more guaranteed Q. Minion Dematerializer can be used to help you push the lane a little bit easier with your Q since you don't buy wave clear on this build. And Approach Velocity helps you stick to your targets. Along with Celerity for the extra little bit of move speed, and Gathering Storm for extra AD. This is the only rune page that the boss ever takes in every single one of his matchups. Thanks for watching. You can check out other Challenger players that I've done over the years and look at their own individual playstyles to get a better sense for your own, or you can check out some of the other weird builds that I've featured on my channel. That's it, bye!